I went onto the mansion just outside Seattle, my sneakers clicking against the smooth stone driveway. I could already hear the bustle of the celebration. It was my father-in-law's birthday, and the building was decked out like something from a magazine. Caterers flowing through the crowd with plates of little dishes, a tower of champagne glasses gleaming under the chandelier, and a jazz trio playing quiet notes in the corner. I adjusted the tie Juliana had picked out for me that morning, feeling a little out of place but eager to play my part. She was already inside, gleaming like she usually did at these parties, her laughter cutting through the murmur of conversations. I caught sight of her across the room, surrounded by her family, her mother, Claudette, fussing over her hair, her brothers, Ree and Marshall, joking with her like she was the center of their existence. She looked like a queen on her throne, and for a second, I just stood there watching her shine. When I finally made my way over, she hardly glanced at me. "Hey," I murmured, leaning in to kiss her cheek, but she averted her head at the last second, distracted by something her cousin was saying. I stood there, hands in my pockets, waiting for her to see me. But she didn't. The air felt heavy, and I cleared my throat. "So, where am I sitting?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She didn't answer, still lost in some story from her childhood. Instead, her cousin sent me a tiny card. Table 23. I scowled, flipping it over, thinking there had to be a mistake. But there wasn't. No name, just a number. I looked around the room, counting the tables. The main ones were inside, near the windows. The music, packed with her family and their posh friends. Table 23 wasn't even in sight. I wandered outdoors, past the terrace where people sipped drinks and laughed, until I found it, hidden between the coat racks, half covered by a row of winter clothing nobody needed in this weather. The table was small, shaky, a single chair that groaned when I sat down. The air was brisk out here, and I could barely hear the jazz over the clatter of caterers moving plates around. I looked back toward the house through the enormous glass doors and saw Juliana still holding court. She caught my eye for a split second, and I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd wave me over. Tell me it was a mix-up. Instead, she smiled, a short, fast thing, and shrugged. "Guess you don't count," she stated, loud enough for me to hear over the ruckus before turning back to her family, like I wasn't even there. The words hit me, like a punch to the chest. I sat there, staring at the empty table, my fists clenched around that foolish little card. It wasn't just about the seat. I'd sat through worse at her family's functions, smiling like an idiot every time they ignored me. But this was different. It burned. I could feel the heat rising in my face, the sting behind my eyes. I'd driven an hour to be here, brought a gift for her dad, put on this stupid tie she liked, and she couldn't even pretend I mattered. I stared at her again, laughing with Ree, her hand on his arm, and something in me twisted. 7 years of marriage, and I was still the person they stuck by the coats, the guy who didn't count. I tried to shake it off. Maybe I was overreacting. These things happen at big parties, right? Someone has to sit out here. But the more I sat there, the colder it grew, inside and out. Even the caterers didn't come this far. If I wanted a drink, I'd have to flag one down. I thought about going back inside, getting a glass of champagne, pretending everything was fine. I'd done it before. Smile, nod, play along. But tonight, that felt impossible. Her words echoed in my head. "Guess you don't count." And every time they replayed, they cut deeper. I wasn't just some guest who got a lousy seat. I was her husband. Didn't that mean anything? I stood up, the chair scraping noisily against the stone. Nobody even turned to look. Inside, the celebration rolled on, glasses clinking, voices rising, Juliana's laughter flying above it all. I took one last look at her through the glass. She was still smiling, still shining, still not looking for me. And that was it. That was enough. I turned and walked away, the cold night air hitting my face. Her words still seared me from the inside out. I'd always been the person who showed up, no questions asked. That's who I was. Juliana's husband, the one who smoothed things over, who preserved the peace even when it cost me something. As I drove away from that lovely estate, the headlights cutting through the dark Seattle suburbs, I could still hear the jazz receding behind me. My palms clutched the steering wheel tighter than they ought to, and my mind kept spinning back to the table by the coat racks. It wasn't just a terrible seat. It was a slap in the face, and I'd accepted it, like I always did. 7. Years of marriage, and I'd spent most of it bending over backwards for her family. Claudette, her mom, never liked me from the start, called me that mechanic once, even though I hadn't handled a wrench in years. Ree and Marshall, her brothers, acted like I was some tag-along they had to tolerate, slinging jokes about my old car or my work, like I wasn't standing right there. Still, I kept showing up. Every holiday, every cookout, every awkward Sunday brunch. I was there, smiling, nodding, playing the good son-in-law, bringing bottles of wine I couldn't afford, fixing their broken garage doors while they sat inside sipping coffee, chuckling at their stories, even the ones that made me feel small, because I thought that's what you do when you love someone. You take it. You prove yourself. I told myself, if I stuck it out long enough, they'd see me, really see me, and I'd finally belong. Juliana always said I worried too much, that her family was just like that. And I believed her because I wanted to believe her. So I swallowed the small insults, the sidelong stares, the way they talked over me like I wasn't even in the room. I told myself it didn't matter, that I was doing it for her, for us. But tonight, sitting out there by the coats while she laughed inside, something snapped. I wasn't swallowing it anymore. I was choking on it. The road stretched ahead, quiet but for the hum of the engine, and I kept thinking about all the times I'd let it slide. Christmas, 2 years ago, when Claudette didn't set a spot for me at the table, so I ate standing in the kitchen like it was no big deal. The 4th of July barbecue where Ree handed me a broom to sweep up after the kids, smiling like it was a favor. Marshall asking me to run to the store for ice during brunch because you're not doing anything anyway, and Juliana? She'd just watch. Maybe offer me a small smile like that was enough to make it okay. But last night, I realized something. I wasn't just being ignored. I was being dismissed, and I was done. I wasn't going back. Not to that party. Not to that life. Not to the man I'd let myself become. I walked out last night, and I was going to keep walking, away from all of it. 6. I stood there, the cloth hanging from my hand, and blinked. Dinner with them? After everything? Why? I asked, not bothering to disguise the sharpness in my tone. She paused, then replied, "We need to talk. About the party. About things." Her voice shook, and I realized this wasn't her plan. Terrence must have pushed her into it. I said I'd think about it and hung up, my mind already racing. I didn't want to go. The thought of sitting at their table, Claudette's chilly glare, across from me, Ree and Marshall smirking like nothing had changed, it made my stomach flip. But then I thought about Juliana, about that folder sitting with Gage, about all the lies she'd fed me while I played the good spouse. This wasn't about making peace. This was my chance to stop swallowing it, to say what I'd been keeping back, for years. I showered, put on a clean shirt, not the tie she liked, just something simple, and took the folder from my desk. I'd kept a copy at home just in case, and today it felt like a weapon in my hands. I placed it into my jacket, the weight of it pressing on my chest, and drove to their house. The whole way there, I prepared what I'd say, how I'd look her in the eye and let it all out. When I got there, the driveway was full. Reese's truck, Marshall's sedan, Juliana's little red automobile. I parked on the street, my hands tight on the wheel for a second before I got out. The home loomed ahead, brick and enormous windows, the kind of place that screamed money and prestige. I rang the bell, and Terrence answered, his face tired yet friendly. "Good to see you," he murmured, shaking my hand like he meant it. Inside, the air smelled like roast chicken and wine, and the dining room was decked out, elegant, candles flickering, plates sparkling. Juliana was there, seated at the table, and when she spotted me, she smiled, dazzling and phony, like she was trying to woo me back into line. "Glad you're over your little tantrum," she whispered as I sat next to her, her hand stroking my arm. She clinked her wine glass against mine, and I forced a smile back, my